Have you ever wondered what compels a person to willingly sacrifice their life for their country? This question brings us to the heart of a fascinating and tragic chapter of World War II, the Kamikaze pilots of Japan. The journey of becoming a kamikaze pilot began not on the battlefield or in the cockpit of a plane, but in the quiet, unassuming surroundings of a soldier's home. It was here that an official letter from the emperor would arrive, effectively drafting the soldier into the kamikaze ranks. These letters were not open invitations, but directives, leaving the recipients little choice but to comply. This recruitment process was steeped in the cultural fabric of Japan, where loyalty to the emperor and nation was paramount. The expectation to serve was not just a military obligation, but a societal one. Duty, honor, and sacrifice were the hallmarks of this commitment, values deeply ingrained in the Japanese psyche. Once selected, these soldiers embarked on a rigorous training process. This wasn't just about honing practical flying skills. It was also about psychological conditioning. They were prepared to face death with equanimity, believing it to be an honor to lay down their life for their country. The emotional and psychological journey was complex and fraught with internal conflict. These young men were torn between their loyalty to Japan and their natural instinct for survival. They were taught to suppress fear and other emotions to maintain a clear head for their mission. This psychological grooming was as critical as their physical training, shaping them into pilots ready for their final flight. In essence, the recruitment and training of a kamikaze pilot was an intricate process, marrying military strategy with cultural values and human psychology. It was a path marked by unyielding loyalty, deep sense of duty, and the grim reality of a final fatal mission. Thus began the journey of becoming a kamikaze, a path marked by unyielding loyalty and a deep sense of duty. Training to become a kamikaze was not just about mastering flying skills. It was an intricate process that required mental and emotional fortitude, a process that was as much about psychological conditioning as it was about physical training. The primary objective was to prepare these young men to face their inevitable fate with equanimity, to embrace death as a part of their duty. The training of a kamikaze pilot was unique. It was rigorous, unyielding, and designed to strip away any semblance of self-preservation. The pilots were subjected to intense psychological conditioning, aimed at suppressing their fear and anxiety. They were taught to view their impending death not as a tragedy, but as an honor, a noble sacrifice for their nation and emperor. This psychological conditioning was crucial in shaping the mindset of a kamikaze pilot. It was not enough that they knew how to fly an aircraft, they had to be prepared to fly it into an enemy ship. To achieve this, the training sought to instill a sense of fatalistic acceptance, a belief that their death was not only inevitable but also desirable. It was a challenging process, rife with emotional turmoil. The pilots were constantly reminded of the importance of their mission, the weight of their duty bearing down on them. They were encouraged to write letters to their families, often filled with expressions of pride and honor. These letters served a dual purpose. They allowed the pilots to say their goodbyes, and they reinforced the cultural narrative of duty and sacrifice. The training of a kamikaze pilot was a journey of self-erasure. It was about eradicating the instinct to survive, replacing it with a readiness to die. It was a process that pushed these young men to their limits, testing their resolve, their loyalty, and their courage. These young men were being prepared not just for a mission, but for their inevitable end. The training was not about ensuring their return, but about making sure they fulfilled their duty, even if it meant paying the ultimate price. It was a training that transformed them into kamikaze pilots, ready to die for their country. The day of the mission was a culmination of months of rigorous training and psychological grooming. As the dawn broke, the kamikaze pilots were aware that this day, unlike any other, could well be their last. The finality of the situation was stark, yet they were prepared to face it with resolute courage. Before embarking on their mission, the pilots had personal encounters with Emperor Hirohito. The emperor, considered divine by the Japanese, emphasized the importance of their impending sacrifice. These interactions were not just ceremonial, but were intended to inspire and instill an even deeper sense of duty in the pilots. It was a poignant reminder that their mission was for the survival and honor of their homeland. The pilots then proceeded to pen their final letters. These were often addressed to their families and loved ones, expressing feelings of pride and honor. The letters encapsulated the ethos of the Kamikaze mission, a blend of selflessness, duty, and sacrifice. They were written with a sense of calm acceptance of their fate, reflecting the deep psychological conditioning they had undergone. The aircraft used for these missions were often old and poorly maintained, a stark contrast to the pilots' unwavering resolve. These machines, laden with extra fuel and explosives, were not designed to return. They were essentially flying bombs, underscoring the desperate circumstances under which the Kamikaze missions were conceived and executed. The pilots then set off, targeting Allied battleships, destroyers, and aircraft carriers. The journey was fraught with danger, as they had to navigate through intense anti-aircraft fire and other defensive measures. Yet they pressed on, their sights set on their targets, their minds focused on their mission. As they approached their targets, the reality of their mission became even more palpable. They were not just pilots anymore. They were human projectiles, their lives tied to the success of their mission. The final moments were often a blur, the world outside the cockpit a melee of fire and smoke, the sound of their engines drowned by the cacophony of war. And then in an instant, it was over. The aircraft crashed into their targets, resulting in a fiery explosion, marking a tragic end to their journey. The Kamikaze missions were a tragic testament to the desperation of war, where survival was not an option. These pilots, young men in their prime, willingly embraced death in the hope that their sacrifice would turn the tide of war in their country's favor. Their legacy is a complex tapestry of duty, honor, sacrifice, and tragedy, a poignant chapter in the annals of history that continues to invoke reflection and debate. The Kamikaze missions were not just about physical damage to the enemy, they were also about psychological warfare. Diving headfirst into the historical context, we find that the Kamikaze tactic took flight in the later stages of World War II. By that point, Japan was in a dire state, resources were dwindling, and the tide of war was turning against them. In this desperate situation, the Kamikaze missions were born, a desperate measure for desperate times. These missions had a profound impact, both in terms of physical destruction and psychological warfare. On the physical front, around 4,000 Kamikaze pilots met their end, taking a substantial toll on the Allied forces. They sank or damaged numerous ships, causing significant disruption to the Allies' operations. However, the effectiveness of these attacks, in terms of actual damage, has been a topic of debate amongst historians. But the physical damage was just one side of the coin. The psychological impact of these missions was equally, if not more, significant. For the Allies, the knowledge that an enemy was willing to sacrifice their life to cause damage was unnerving and demoralizing. It was a form of warfare that the Allies were not prepared for, and it took a toll on their morale. On the home front, these missions had a profound psychological impact as well. The Japanese public was told stories of brave young men willingly giving their lives for their country. These stories served as a powerful propaganda tool, boosting morale and reinforcing the cultural narrative of duty and sacrifice. But the Kamikaze missions also showcased the dire state of Japan's war effort. The fact that Japan was resorting to such extreme measures was a clear indication of their desperation. It was a stark reminder of the brutal realities of war and the lengths to which a nation would go when backed into a corner. The Kamikaze tactic was a double-edged sword, inflicting damage while also showcasing the dire state of Japan's war effort. The legacy of the Kamikaze pilots is a complex one, shrouded in both admiration and sadness. Over the years, perceptions in Japan have shifted significantly. Immediately after the war, these pilots were hailed as national heroes, martyrs who made the ultimate sacrifice for their country. They were seen as the embodiment of the samurai spirit, their actions steeped in the age-old traditions of honor, loyalty, and duty. However, as the years rolled on, a different perspective began to emerge. The narrative of heroism started to share space with a sense of tragedy and futility. A growing number of people began to see these young men not just as heroes, but also as victims of a war that demanded too much. Today, these pilots are remembered as a symbol of extreme loyalty and sacrifice, a testament to the human capacity for self-destruction in the name of duty. The story of the kamikaze pilots pushes us to question the concepts of duty, honor, and sacrifice. As we delve deeper into their narrative, we find ourselves juxtaposing the societal expectations that drove these young men and the heartbreaking human cost of their actions. In the theater of war, duty and honor often take center stage, overshadowing the harsh realities of sacrifice. The kamikaze pilots were no exception. They were thrust into an unfathomable role, driven by a sense of duty to their emperor and nation and the honor they believed lay in making the ultimate sacrifice. It's a sobering reminder of how societal expectations can shape the trajectory of an individual's life, even to the point of death. Yet, we must remember that behind the veil of duty and honor, there was a profound human cost. Thousands of young lives were abruptly ended, dreams and aspirations snuffed out in an instant. Each kamikaze pilot had a story beyond their mission. They were sons, brothers, friends, and lovers, their lives intertwined with those they left behind. Their sacrifice was not just their own, but also of those who mourned their loss. The narrative of the kamikaze pilots also compels us to reflect on the concept of sacrifice in the context of war. Is it truly an honor to die for one's country, or is it a tragedy that such a sacrifice is ever required? It's a question with no easy answers, but one that continues to resonate in every corner of the globe where conflict persists. Reflecting on the story of the kamikaze pilots, we're reminded that war is not just about strategies and battles won, but about the human lives caught in its unforgiving grasp. It's a narrative that transcends time and geography, prompting us to question, to empathize, and to remember. In the end, the legacy of the kamikaze pilots is a stark reminder of the extremes to which war can drive individuals and the tragic loss of young lives in the brutal realities of conflict.